coming. All right.
Good morning, all. Thank you for joining with us. This is our final day of our issues conference. We've got a lot of good discussions going on, but we have three members here today, all for a certain purpose and different issues that I'd like to talk about. Then we take it up for questions. We're going to go with Ashley Henson, who serves on appropriations, but I'm very proud of the fact they're appointing her to the Select Committee on China, and this is one committee I think you should all follow closely. Remember, 146 Democrats voted for this Select Committee. I don't know if you watched their first hearing, very impressive. Hakeem and I, the minority leader, got together and met with all of them. Really want this committee to be bipartisan. This is something that I tried to create in the minority. I had Nancy Pelosi agreed to it after 8 months, and then she, right before we were announcing it, I think somebody in Washington Post even wrote a story on it or interviewed everybody, and then they stopped it. I think one of our greatest failures is America has not spoken united about what they believe China should and should not be doing. And we have lost a lot of business, a lot of jobs, the threats in the future. And so this is one area which I think could really have a lot of difference. We got Burgess Owens here, serves on the Education Committee, H.R. 5, the Parents' Bill of Rights. This is something he's been working on for quite some time. One of the reasons you told me at the very beginning was you ran for Congress for. Bruce Westerman, Chairman, Natural Resources. You see H.R. 1, lower energy cost bill. 3 committees moved it through. Yours is the anchor of all this, of how to make us energy independent with the foundation, the NEPA reform, and others. So what I want to just do, have a little discussion with all of them, and then we'll go into questions. That works for everybody too. Actually, just talking about the China Select Committee, and I know you serve on appropriations. You come from Middle America in Iowa. What we have found, just at the very beginning, you had a first hearing, which I thought was very good. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about what are some of the goals or what are some of the areas that this select committee would be working on and working towards?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for appointing me to this very important committee. I think it goes without saying, but you agree that China is one of the greatest threats facing our country. I believe it's the issue of my generation and of many generations, because if we don't take action right now, the next century will not be an American one. It will be one dominated by China. It is very clear that the Chinese have a plan, right? By 2049, they want to be the preeminent world power for the economy, for our military, and for their social plan. So that's what they want. That's what the roadmap is that they've laid out. So I think it's imperative that we lay out our roadmap of what that next American century looks like, but also lay out a plan to hold them accountable for, let's say, the human rights atrocities that they continue to perpetrate. And if you did watch our first hearing, you would have seen Tong Yi, a former dissident or a dissident who was actually imprisoned in a camp, tell her story of what she faced when she did speak out in China, and what the Chinese people are facing every single day. They're being oppressed, and we need to highlight that. The other issue that I think is important, we need to make sure that we don't allow a single cent of taxpayer money to go to China. This is money that they continue to use against us. Every cent that goes there, they're using it against us, whether it's to spy on us or whether it's to enrich their military or to continue to perpetrate those human rights abuses. Then you talk about the theft, right? And Speaker McCarthy kind of hit on this, where we've lost jobs, we've lost intellectual property to China. We have ceded that authority because we've been appeasing China for so long instead of competing with China. So we need to highlight those instances where they have cheated, right? They don't follow the rules. Being from Iowa, we have a unique situation where we actually had a spy ring that was busted in the middle of Iowa. They were trying to steal our seeds so that they could take them back to China to reverse engineer them. So they don't want to play by the rules. This is a true national security issue for us. And again, the policy that we're going to work on in the next 10 years in a bipartisan way, which I think is really crucial here. You saw a lot of consensus under Chairman Gallagher and obviously Representative Krishnamurthy. And you're going to see some really great policies come out of our committee to tackle all of those very important issues.
You know, you brought a very good point. A lot of people think China, and they just think certain intellectual property they steal. But you're in Iowa, and food security and food safety is so important, especially around the world. Watching that they were caught there spying, trying to steal seeds to re-engineer that as well. So it's every part of the country, and that's why this committee is so important. One of the reasons why I appointed you, and I sat with Hakeem beforehand to show him the individuals that I would appoint to this, making the point from certain committees, very serious. And you just brought up the bipartisanship. Do you think we'll be able to carry this out in a bipartisan manner?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. And if you look at the membership on both sides of the aisle that are a part of this committee, and I think our first hearing was a great roadmap for how this committee is going to operate. We all have great ideas about and unity here on how we're going to tackle China. I think we all understand the great purpose behind our committee, and if we don't take action, what's at stake. And so that, I think, is something you're going to see a lot of agreement on. The speaker mentioned the bipartisan vote tally on the floor. I think that speaks to the unity behind this issue, that it's time to stop appeasing China and it's time to start competing with China.
Burgess, now, you have such a compelling personal story, and people would talk about, certain struggles, sports and others, but when you tell the story, you always tell about the importance of education and how that changed your life. And when you were first running for Congress, you always told me you want to be on the Education Committee. You actually didn't want to go to other committees because this is what you really care about and what I've watched you mentor others. And here's H.R. 5. You've been a critical member of making this happen, getting out of committee, the Parents' Bill of Rights. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how it ensures parents have a say?
Thanks, Speaker. Appreciate it. Well, let's start off, first of all, with I was blessed to have been raised in the Deep South, remarkable family, remarkable community, segregated at the time, but we believed in something which our founders believed in, that is, ignorant and free can never be. So our community was very focused on education, and I've seen over the decades that's changing. There's something else that has been very concerning. Not only have we been shifting away from having our kids educated, but shifting away from the concept that it's parents who have the rights to make sure their child is given the direction, the help, the CEO of their lives in terms of being educated. So the Parents' Bill of Rights gets back to something so basic that really should not be any concerns about the process. And that is, first of all, the right to be heard, the right to know the curriculum, the right to understand and see the budget that the school system is going through, the district at the same time, and also the right to make sure that child's privacy is in place and protected. Very, very simple things, but the most important thing is this. We cannot have a free society if our children are not taught basic things about themselves, about our history, about critical thinking skills. And who is overseeing that process are parents, not teachers, not unions, not bureaucrats. And if we get back that basic concept, the parents will be involved, which is happening right now, by the way. I'm very, very excited about that. And we'll make sure that this next generation is educated, excited, and can really be the producers that we've always expected them as we've raised them throughout the decades.
As you travel the country, which you do a lot in a lot of different areas, you come back to me and you tell me this is like the number one issue you hear from parents, and it doesn't, regardless of party. What are some of the things that when we bring this bill forward, I notice out of committee, the Democrats held back, and I don't understand why. I mean, when you just lay out the 5 pillars, I don't see any disagreement with people. And when I work the country and see people, parents, they're caring about their kids' education. So do you think Democrats might come across?
I'm thankful we have a majority to get this word out. What concerns me is I've seen over the decades, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is how many kids are left behind. There's a study that I ran across back in 2017, and I want you guys to think about this. In the state of California, 75% of the black boys in the state of California cannot pass standard reading and writing tests. In Baltimore, zero proficiency in math in many districts. This is what's happening throughout our country, and it's a national security issue. These children that are not growing up to think, to produce, to be proud of who they are, will impact the rest of our society. So just know whether your child is in a good district or not, or you think they are, at the end of the day, our nation has to be educated. Our nation has to be, as a total process, diverse and as we are, to believe and understand our country is the greatest place in the history of mankind. If they do not believe that, we all are at risk. And it's sad to say that 17 Democrats voted against Parents' Bill of Rights, that parents are controlled, but parents should be should not be looked at as terrorists when it comes down to asking the big questions about their children's future. So this is going to be a big one. I'm so thankful to be part of it. I'm so thankful that we have a majority now that understands this to be pushing it through, and I'm just excited that the parents will know that they will have a seat at the table, make sure their child is being educated correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HR 1, and you are. 3 committees worked on it, but you are the foundation of this whole bill. And when we think about the challenges in America, inflation high, price of gasoline is $1 higher than when Biden took over. We've watched government pick certain forms of energy over others and put us in jeopardy and make geopolitical a more difficult place. Even if you want to build anything, the permitting process is backwards in them. So talk to us a little about HR 1. It's our #1 bill. You're pretty much the author of it from all the work you have done, and from NEPA reform and others that won't just help this, could also help from infrastructure and everything else we're doing. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Speaker. It's an honor to be here to visit about HR 1 and to hear the other issues that our conference is working on. But as you've prioritized our lower energy cost bill as HR 1, it shows that we're putting this front and center to the American public, that energy is a big issue. Energy is the foundation of our economy. It's fundamental to everything that we do. And as energy prices go, so goes our economy. But it's much deeper than that. When we become dependent on other countries for energy, then that is a national security issue. And when we talk about energy, we're talking about all forms of energy. I think people want to label Republicans as just fossil fuel energy people, but we're talking about the full spectrum of energy. How do we develop more domestic energy? How do we become less reliant on foreign countries? And today, when you talk about energy, we're not just talking about oil and gas. You automatically start talking about mining, because to have an electrified economy, you have to do a lot of mining. And there is an attitude in our country now that we want everything, we just don't want it in our backyard. And what the Lower Energy Cost Act does, it addresses energy production, it addresses mining, and it addresses NEPA, which is at the root of stopping a lot of domestic energy production. So we want to streamline NEPA. We're not gutting any environmental laws, and we can make a strong case that what we're doing on energy is much better for the environment in the long run than the path that we're on right now. When we make energy in America, we make it cleaner and safer and more efficiently than any place else in the world does. When we mine in America, we do it better than any place else in the world does. We do it with stricter environmental regulations. We do it with no human rights violations. And at the same time, we could be increasing jobs and growing wealth in our country instead of exporting wealth to countries like China and Russia and Saudi Arabia, where we're going to be more reliant on for these for energy sources and for minerals if we don't develop it here domestically. So this is a really big issue that affects all of America. You know, as I look around the room, you see the lights, all of the computers, everything that keeps us going comes back to energy and mining. And we've gotten away from doing that in America like we should, even though we're blessed with so many resources here, and we could just be dominating the world in energy production.
You know, it's unique. It plays directly into Ashley's committee, too. Our goal is not to be dependent on China. But if we can't mine our own minerals, we're more dependent on China. China controls 90% of all critical minerals, but they also control 95% of the processing of critical minerals. And some of the real challenges, if people are willing to put the capital up, they can't get the permits or others to go. And you raise a very good point. I mean, when you think about if you're going to produce something anywhere in the world environmentally sound, human rights are going to be cared for here in America than anywhere else. And our natural gas is 41% cleaner than Russian natural gas.
Right. And even the oil we produce in the Gulf of Mexico has much less environmental impact than the oil that we ship across the ocean that's produced somewhere else. So we win in every category when we do it here at home.
Well, this will be marked, it's been marked up in your committee already. And then we'll we're going to have time to debate it on the floor a lot and move it through. Hopefully we'll see that it's bipartisan as well. These are just a few of the issues that we've already, I know we haven't been in the majority for very long, but we've got a lot of work cut out for us. I mean, the best way to tackle inflation, best way to make us economically stronger with more jobs is H.R. 1. The greatest future that we have is to be able to make sure we're not dependent upon China. And we all know education is the great equalizer, and we've known what has happened with COVID going forward, and this lost learning that has taken place, and what's really the wake-up call that happened during COVID of parents wanting a better, more say in their kids' education, seeing what's being taught. So we just put those pillars out there. So they're all critical about our future, and this is really what we've been focusing on. Let's go to questions. Thank you for helping cover our retreat. We appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about education.
Please.
You guys are going to vote on it likely.
This is fabulous. You're asking about the subject. Take all the time you want.
Are there concerns about federal overreach with this legislation, the fact that the federal government is placing, or House Republicans want to place some requirements on localities for education?
Okay, first of all, let's look at education as a civil right. There should be no child in this country based on the zip code, the color, the background. That should be stopped from dreaming the dreams they have. Think and go through again the tenets of this process. We're saying that all parents, no matter where they are, what their background, should have the right to know this curriculum, not to dictate, but to know and give feedback, and also be heard, so they give feedback. They should have the right to know the budget of the district, the school system, and they should also make sure they have the right for privacy for their children. None of that is overreach. Matter of fact, I think what we have is this conference is a very innovative legislation that allows the innovators to be able to compete, to bring the best ideas, and to bring the best of those children, no matter where they might be. So I'm excited about this, and I'm thankful that we finally have legislation that's going to help all children, no matter what their background is, color, to move forward and experience the American dream.
And the last pillar is if there's any violence on campus. You watch what happened to that father in Loudoun County when he went to the school board that his daughter had gotten molested in the girls' bathroom by a boy, and that had happened before. Had he been notified or others, maybe that wouldn't happen again. And when that boy was transferred someplace else, I believe it happened again. So if there was some violence on the school your kids went to, you'd want to know. I mean, what's so unique, and this is the point you bring up about civil rights, it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, it doesn't matter the wealth. Once you have a child, it's the most important thing in your life. You will give your life to this child before it can say your name. And you'll risk more for it. So there's nothing from a standpoint, you have a right to know what's being taught. You have a right just to curriculum, not dictating what it is, but to provide it. You should have a right, where are they spending their money? The right to the privacy, the right to know the violence is going on. And I think that just cuts across. And from a personal point of view, looking what's happened across America just in the last couple of years with COVID and others, I think this is just kind of a rallying cry. And I don't see this as a partisan issue at all. I see how we work through it, just listening to parents. And when we rolled it out, we had parents come in. I don't know if any of you were there. Very compelling, some of the stories. And they were just so frustrated. Would someone speak up for me? And that's why I think this is so unique. And we made it H.R. 5 because it has 5 pillars. And you go to kindergarten age 5. So you can remember it. It's the importance here. And I truly believe that this could get a lot of momentum across the country. Yes, sir.
About the investigation that your 3 committee chairman yesterday into the prosecutor from New York. You guys have raised a lot of concerns about the prosecutor. But what about the actual allegations here that the former president may have falsified business records to cover, for hush money payments to cover up this alleged affair with adult film actors? Do you have any concerns about that?
Look, the thing I think about, it was interesting. Someone briefed me on the use of money, a situation like this before. And you probably covered this. Remember when the DNC and Hillary Clinton paid the law firm $1 million, but but and said that it was for something else, and we found out later it wasn't. It was all about the Russia collusion. It wasn't for a legal part. And so they went through, and they got investigated. $1 million they spent, and you know what? At the end of the day, they didn't get prosecuted. They got fined. Hillary's campaign got fined $8,000, and the DNC got fined $100,000, even though they used $1 million. They knowingly hid the fact of what they were doing to try to hide. They got investigated. So I look at it from this perspective. We live in America, and it should be equal justice. This was personal money. This wasn't trying to hide. This was 7 years ago, statute of limitation. And I think in your heart of hearts, you know, too, that you think this is just political. And I think that's what the rest of the country thinks, and we're kind of tired of that. I mean, we're sitting up here just going through an issue conference. We just brought up 3 major bills that we've worked all of our time. We've strived to get these bills created. We worked really hard to get to the majority, telling the American public that this is what we're doing. This is what we're going through. And this is what we're explaining to you. And I know you've asked me this question a couple times all during this issue conference, and then you'll come back and it dominates the conference. No, we're not talking about this in our conference. You're just asking about it. So it only dominates your asking. But we're excited about doing something to make sure we're not dependent on China. We're very excited about making sure children and parents have a say in their kids' education. And we're excited about making America energy independent, lowering the price of gasoline for everyone, sustaining a geopolitical world that's actually safer, and actually bringing down inflation. So those are the things I focus mainly on. But I do get concerned when I look out there and I see justice not being equal to others, especially in the history of where we are. And the tough part is with a local DA playing in presidential politics. If that starts right there, don't you think it'll happen across the country? So I even watched an individual who was on your network, CNN. See, I watch your network sometimes, changing channels. And I know him well, and he's a Democrat. He's a strong liberal on the other end, and he just thought this was all wrong, too. And so I think it's a place that the country can unite. They want equal justice. They just think it's wrong. Yes, sir. Sure.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is meeting today once again with Russian President Vladimir Putin. What sign does this tell you, number one? And number two, how do you stop China's influence with programs like the 1,000 Talents Program and Confucius Institute here in the United States on university campuses and at our labs, taking that information back to China to be used in the government and for military purposes?
Great question. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to turn to Ashley, too, because this is exactly what this committee would be looking at. But your first premise of your question, think about it. President Xi has only left China twice since the pandemic, and both times revolved around Putin, Russia. The other time was North Korea and Iran. That's a very, very concerning future. For those who study history, it seems a little like the 1930s and the axis of power of individuals creating. These are not democracies, but what are they fighting? They talk about a new world order. You look at Putin, who no longer respects the Russian constitution and the term limits of president. You watch President Xi change his constitution so he can serve another term. You've watched his advocates of taking Taiwan. You watch North Korea now. All that transpires because there's a vacuum of leadership around the world. And why did this begin? Well, the pivot, a couple different places. When Joe Biden met with Putin and he lifted all the sanctions of Nord Stream 2, it gave the wrong message to Putin to invade Ukraine. When President Biden didn't listen to our military and he pulled out without telling even our allies, and the Bagram prison broke free, and the prisoner actually killed 13 Americans, creating new 13 Gold Star families, and Afghanistan collapsed. We watched our own allies pivot. The new chancellor of Germany goes to meet with President Xi. Saudi Arabia believes they need a greater relationship now with China based upon America. Now we've watched, not only during Obama's time, bringing Russia back into the Middle East, now Biden has brought China into the Middle East, where now they're brokering a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That used to be America. That used to happen at Camp David. So the world scares me where it is. And why do they think they can do this? Because there became a void of leadership, of strength, of questioning the commitment of America, or they can trust us. And an underlying place of all that is the energy policy of America. It gave Russia an opportunity to open up. It gave them a bound together of why to strive. And so that's a real concern. That's one of the bases of where the whole premise of a select committee on China came was on the 75th anniversary of Normandy. I was walking the gravestones. Nancy Pelosi was there as well, and I've looked at all those young men from the Star of David to the cross, all about the same age, all dying around the same time, and wondering at that moment, what could the lawmakers have done? The policymakers, not the week before, but the decade before that day would never have to come. What should they have done when they first saw Hitler, Mussolini, and Japan getting together? What policies should they have prepared for ahead of time? What dependencies did they become weak upon? What aggression did they look the other way on building up a military of Hitler, even though it went against the Treaty of Versailles? Or the movement in of Czechoslovakia and Austria? Or the movement into Crimea? Or the desire to take Taiwan? So, walking through the pandemic, thinking about where was America waking up to medical supplies? What dependencies do we have for resupplying when it comes to critical minerals? What about our own food supply? That was the premise of why we created the Select Committee on China. And what you talk about, the Confucius Centers and others sitting here inside America, the visas, the inside our college campuses, the stealing of intellectual property. So let me go to Ashley about this, because this is exactly one of the premises of what they're working on.
And it comes down to the propaganda, right? And that's what I think our committee is tackling head on. It is peeling back that curtain for the American people about what China has done to infiltrate our country. It is that propaganda machine, whether it's a Confucius Institute, whether it's a policing station that is designed to tamp down their people here in the United States, or you look at our committee's role in making sure we're spotlighting, and I hate to use the pun, but obviously it elevated the situation a little bit, the spy balloon, did escalate this situation for the American people about the spy operation and the espionage operation that the Chinese have in our country. So I think the speaker hit on a lot of the themes that our committee does need to work on to be in storytelling mode for the American people about why this policy blueprint matters. It matters for energy. It matters for food security. It matters for the people of China. Our beef is not with the people of China. They are being oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. It matters for our military to make sure that we can be strong. I think our committee's main role is deterrence. We don't want to go to war with China. We want to protect our allies. We want to make America the strongest country in the world and continue to have that legacy. But again, all of these things work together, and it's why our committee's work will be so important over the next few months.
And I think in a short amount of time, you brought up that balloon. You watched Congress take action very quickly that week. And what was the action we took? 100% of Congress voted on a resolution against the CCP. And you watched. You didn't ask it, but it's part of your question. When President Xi changed the Constitution to serve another term, he put himself into equal to Mao, but he also put the CCP stronger. And so he fills this void. What we're trying to accomplish here, you first have to educate the American public. We're doing it in a bipartisan way. We put this committee together with Hakeem. We kept the size of the committee between Republican and Democrat very close. I would hope that the Senate would create a similar committee. This is not a place that's going to be partisanship. This is a place that's really thinking, how do we speak with one voice, educate the American people, stop the dependency on China, and stop the atrocities of things that they do. Yes, ma'am.
When was the last time you spoke to the former president, and have you talked to him about the investigation
I have not talked to the president. Shoot, did I say maybe 3 weeks? No, I haven't talked to him about the investigation at all. Yes.
Can I just add something real quick? What I'm hoping that you all see here is what's unique about this particular conference. We start off with something called Commitment to America, so the Americans know exactly where our focus will be, where our priorities will be. Right now, as a conference, we made it very clear our priorities are debt, China, and education. And the fact that American people are drawn to those three things, that's what they want, and that's what we're going to give them. And I also want you guys to think about this. I made a point a few minutes ago that should have been a shock and awe, but there was not. And this is what we need to make sure we don't ever get used to this process. When I said in 2017 that 75% of the black boys in the state of California cannot read and write, do you notice how really we didn't think that was weird, it was different and crazy? Because we've been slowly transitioning, progressively thinking that's okay. We should never, ever think, no matter what the color that person might be or the background or zip code, that that's okay. So we're saying as a party, we know education, ignorant free can never be. We believe that, and we're listening to the parents, and everyone out there should be very excited about the fact that we're taking this on as it should have been decades ago, but we're going to make sure we put this right for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
HR 1, you said at the very start of this presser that, or at the very start of this conference, that it was important to really open up the process, have members' input. Are we going to see a similar open amendment process when HR 1 comes to the floor? And another thing you said in that first presser is that you guys will be talking about AUMF over the next 3 days. I'm wondering, is there any decision as to whether or not the bill the Senate's voting on today will be taken up in the House?
Perfect. Can I first answer your question that will help probably for the rest of the term, kind of my philosophy, okay? In this Congress and in this conference, we had this discussion about half the conference has never served the majority. The other half has served the majority before, but it was a different type of majority. It was a much bigger majority. I learned this maybe the hard way, going through the speaker race and others. We have to retool and rethink, okay? So in most Congresses, when you have a big majority, you watch what the Democrats did. They just changed all the rules. Like, you didn't have to show up. Bills don't have to go through committee, and all the bills are written with the speaker. That doesn't sustain well. That's not good policy. So we opened the process back up, and we've done all that. But we have to front load everything, right? So it's not where committees just work and then, okay, we're going to get it on the floor, and people are just going to then change with their amendments. What we try to do now is work all that out at the beginning, okay? So we have, especially in bills such as this, with the Commitment to America, we spent the last year, and it wasn't just Bruce sitting down. We had a whole task force. They traveled to different places of the country. So we've had all that input already in the process. We walk through it. There'll be amendments. But we've had this very open process. So especially on Commitment to America ideas, they've all been there. Now, when you ask me questions about bills in the Senate, I want you to believe and understand this principle and philosophy. Just because a bill passes in the Senate, I know it's unbelievable something passes over there, doesn't mean it comes directly to the floor. I believe in the process. I think we've got to get back to the foundation the way Congress and Senate was designed, right? They have ideas, they pass something, we pass something, we go to conference and work it out. The AUMF, it's something we both have talked about a long time. It'll have to go through committee. But what I look at, and I was trying to look at what did the Senate pass, I think it has a good chance of, one, getting through the committee and getting through the floor. But don't preconceive any idea. And one thing you got to know in principle, too, we're not taking up an omnibus. It's not going to happen. We got to get back to doing the work that the American people expect us to do. Yes, ma'am.
Yesterday, Chairman McCall mentioned that any AUMF would be a repeal and replace. Is that where you stand?
Well, the thing you have to understand, there's more than one AUMF, right? There's one dealing with Iraq. That's the one they repealed. And then there's a worldwide one on terrorism that they kept. I always have a concern, and especially when you deal with an AUMF and others. I was not here to vote on either of the creation of those, but you're 20 years into this now. I think it's very healthy that we take this up and look at this. I still want to have the ability. I watched The World Is Not a Safe Place. I still want to take actions if there is a terrorist anywhere around the world. And if we're keeping that one AUMF and we're removing another one, That's personally where I believe I am. So I want to see and allow this to go through committee, and I think it would be probably modernizing a term someone would see, but adapting. And we have a lot of members, which is so unique from when the AUMF were first voted on. When that decision was made, there's a lot of people sitting in Congress that went to defend us under that AUMF, and I think they should have a say in the process. Yes, sir.
Personally, you do support in principle repealing those two AUMFs.
Not both. I support in keeping the worldwide AUMF so there's action that can be taken if there's a terrorist anywhere in the world. But Iraq, we're 20 years into it. I don't have a problem repealing that. Yeah. Yeah. But one provides the ability of terrorism around. Well, let's go up front. You had your hand up early. Come on.
To your point earlier about all the issues that Republicans are trying to highlight here, things that those folks have worked on, and in addition, inflation, which was another big issue for Republicans in 2022 when you guys took the majority. When Republicans are coming out and defending Trump so hard at this point with this investigation in Manhattan, does that risk taking the eye off the ball and taking away from the issues that Republicans might have picked up suburban voters in 2022 going forward?
Okay. I hear your question. I don't agree with your question, right? So it's not here that we're coming to defend President Trump. What we're coming to defend is equal justice in America. And I think every American believes in that. I've watched CNN last night, a person that is never going to vote for me with the exact same position. So I don't know if you would phrase the question the same to him as you would to me, because we both come to the same answer, that what we see before us is not equal justice. What we see before us is a political game being played by a local. Look, this isn't New York City. This is just the Manhattan. This is just the borough DA. Okay? So understand the question you're raising or the person you're defending. Do you want to defend a borough DA who's taking up a case of a person who's a nominee for president, don't talk about party or the name, who others have already looked at and says it doesn't work, who is more than 7 years beyond the status of the time? I think if you really thought that way and looked at all those facts, you probably wouldn't ask me that question, not in the same way, or even ask it. You would have asked me about education, China, or HR1.
Which is what I want to ask about.
Go right ahead.
Which is what I want to ask about. Yesterday, Congressman Carlos Jimenez spoke about chain supply, not to supply China, to look to our neighbors in Latin America as far as that is concerned. How are the Republicans looking into the influence of China into Latin America?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to continuing to look at opportunities for trade. We've seen a lackadaisical approach out of this administration to enhancing our trade around the world, and providing these opportunities is exactly how we're going to counter China's influence, whether it's in Africa or whether it's in Central America or in the Indo-Pacific. And that's going to be our focus, is continuing to find ways where the United States can partner with these countries, because it does a couple of things. Not only does it counter China and they're trying to, in the influence that they're trying to perpetrate in these countries, but it helps lift people up around the world. And that's exactly what we should be doing, because China is doing it the wrong way. They're coming into these countries and making grand promises, very expensive propositions for these countries, and they're desperate. So they're saying yes. America needs to provide that opportunity through economic growth. And so I think that's what we need to be putting pressure on the administration to continue to enhance trade opportunities. We need to make sure that any trade agreements we do have teeth in them. We know China doesn't play by the rules. I mentioned that earlier, but you look at the trade agreement that we have in place, they didn't follow through with that either. So this is about continuing to show that America is a willing partner. We care about economies around the world. We care about safety and security for our people, and we care about helping elevate other countries as well.
And if I can add to that, when we look at energy and mineral resources, China is hoarding minerals from around the world, and they're doing it without any kind of environmental guidelines. When in the 1990s, we produced about as much copper and steel as China, and today they're producing 10 times more copper and almost 11 times more steel than we produce. As our economy goes more towards an electrified economy, we're going to be more dependent on them, which is going to spread their influence around the world. They do not have the resources in China. They're dependent on going to the Middle East, to Africa, to Latin America, not just for their mineral resources, but also to grow the food that they need to feed their people. So it's all of this is connected together, and it starts with energy and mining, and America becoming more self-sufficient and not reliant on China and not promoting China's bad actions around the world.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Maybe you could just sum up a little bit for us here. You appear to have been working very hard in these first few months as Speaker. You have this number of policy proposals, and yet, the workings of the former president continue to play such a big role in your party. Can you talk a little bit about your approach here? Do you believe you can lead the Republican Party into a sort of different era, a different direction, or is former President Trump really still the head of your party here?
Okay. In the press room, for all of you, he is. If you think I can lead, why would I go through 15 rounds if I didn't think? And let's just go with facts. I think facts are the best way to deal with any precedent, okay? We start off, we go through 15 rounds. On the first day, we keep our first promise and repeal 87,000 IRS agents. We get 146 Democrats to join with us and vote for the creation of the Select Committee on China. We no longer have proxy voting. Members are now showing up to work. You now have a relationship between your speaker and your minority leader, which you haven't had before. We stopped the selling of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China, with more than 130 or 113 Democrats joining with us. We repeal ESG that would harm the economics. We talked about making our streets safe. Our first challenge was D.C. and the crime there. We move even though the president said he wouldn't. We said we'd get to the origins of COVID. The president just now signed, again, unanimous out of the Senate and on the floor as well. We said we would bring a Parents' Bill of Rights. We've marked it up out of committee. We've had our first hearing with the China Select Committee that was at night, very bipartisan. Even the Washington Post wrote an editorial about it. We said energy would be our number one issue as well. The bill is marked up, going to be coming to the floor, going to be having the debate. We just came to an issue conference that you didn't see fighting. We're focused. We've watched what happened in the country where the Democrats spent another $5.9 trillion, brought us inflation, brought us a challenge with banking. We had a banking issue conference to all talk with all of you where we're going. As you sat down at that conference, or that press conference, you sat with two members who had been regulators, had worked in the Treasury Department, had owned banks before, and just had a policy discussion. And I bet you walked away thinking, man, these people have a handle on this. They're not playing politics with it, which an action people could see before. For the first time, you've had a bill come to the floor in more than 7 years that was totally open. That never happened once under Nancy Pelosi, under Paul Ryan. We only have a 5-seat majority, and we allowed anybody to bring it forth. For the first time, you watched a bipartisan, all the Republicans and Democrats, to meet together, not on a classified briefing, but to talk about an issue that I think is our greatest threat, our debt. In a time where you think politics is not going to allow us to do a debt ceiling, where the president says he doesn't want to negotiate, you watch the speaker and the leader talk before that we brought the Congressional Budget Office director in to lead. Anybody could get up and ask the question. So what's interesting to me is we have changed Congress on its head in less than 3 months. Now, the real question you really want to ask me, can I change the press room on its head to follow what Congress is doing? Now, my first question, your first answer to your question, yeah, I believe I can lead. I believe we're achieving that because we're leading together. I don't know if I can lead all of you, but I'm going to continue to meet with you. I'm going to continue to try, and we're going to make it happen eventually. I believe in you, okay? So you continue to be here. You continue to listen. And I thought this press conference started off better than all the others. So we started with a question on something we talked about. That hasn't happened in a whole Congress either. So I felt good about it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please.
At the press conference, you mentioned possibly attaching policy items to it. As you've talked to members in the last couple of days, have you narrowed down what kind of spending cuts Republicans are going to put on the table, what kind of policy things you want attached?
Okay, yeah.
Instability with the banking situation. Are you at all concerned that running into this negotiation with the president could compound the instability?
Great question. Let me take the end of your question and work backwards, okay? You brought up the banking issue. What does that do to the debt ceiling? Well, that should wake everybody up. Why are we having a banking crisis? Because government spent too much and created inflation. So should I ignore it? Should we do exactly what the president's saying and just lift the debt ceiling and create more inflation and more banking problems? I mean, this should be a wake-up call to everybody. Say, oh, my God, we better do something about this debt ceiling. And for everybody, I watched a Democrat the other day listen, oh, all these things are going to get cut. The first question is, it's savings. Why? Because it's the American public. And if I could spend a couple minutes, because you didn't get to be in the briefing with the Republicans and Democrats with the Congressional Budget Office. So the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, just gave their revised numbers, okay? In the next 10 years, American public is going to have to pay $10.5 trillion in interest. So that for every American on your credit card, the thing you hate is when you pay that high interest. But I want America to understand what that 10.5 trillion means. That's just in the next 10 years. If you take the last 80 years, we've only paid 9 trillion in interest. So the question being, is it a question about spending or is it a question about revenue? Well, if you look at the Congressional Budget Office, on the 50-year average, we usually bring in about 17.1% of GDP in revenue. What's revenue we're bringing in today? 20%. We're above the 50-year average. How many times have we ever got 20%? Only 2 times. Only 2 times in history. So we're bringing the most we've ever brought in. On a 50-year average, we usually spend somewhere around 21-point-something% of GDP in spending. How much are we spending right now? 23.6 on our way to 25%. So we're spending well above a 50-year average, but we're bringing in more money well above in the 50 years. So the real question comes from a simple point like that. We're spending too much. It created a banking problem. And it's going to create a debt to 120% of GDP we have not seen since World War II. And we got a challenge with China. So the banking issue should wake us all up and say we should do something. And for every Democrat out there saying, oh my God, if you had savings, what would happen? We would go back to what we were spending 4 months ago. You were all pretty good 4 months ago, weren't you? So I believe to get a debt ceiling agreement, you have to be spending less than we spent before. And if we had H.R. 1, and we had energy prices lower, there'd be lower inflation, so banks would be safer. Americans would have more money in their pockets. There'd be more jobs, and the world would be safer. I would think that'd save us money. If we put in work requirements, it would help people to get back to work, so that would deal with the supply chain. More people would be working, more revenue would come in. If he wanted to do something of securing the border, it would stop 300 Americans from dying today and dying tomorrow and dying the next day. So all I'm saying is, from a perspective looking back, Republicans are being very rational, sensible. And if I look at everyone across this country, they think we should get in a room and work this out, especially because of the banking issue. Look, thank you all very much. I appreciate the time. Take care. We got Drew Brees. I don't want to be late.